Hi, it's Songy here, your personal brand coach. In this video, I want to talk to you about you. I often tell everybody that personal brand building is not about you. It's about the people you seek to serve. But before we get to that, we need to find out about you actually. It's about the self-discovery and self-affirmation process so that when we look outwards, it's a lot more congruent. You feel yourself and you can project yourself outward more easily. So that's the reason why I look at you right here in this video. Now, first question I ask everybody is, how do you see yourself? Who are you? How do you describe yourself? That question is not very hard to answer, but the second question gets interesting. How others see you? So there are two ways to go about this. You can imagine, and the feedback, based on the feedback and the testimonials and the conversations you had with your colleagues and your clients and your managers, etc., you get their feedback and you know roughly 3 or 4 keywords that you can assign, you can actually remember, or you can write down in your workbook as you go through this. And the trick, the second part gets really interesting. If you create a form, as I suggested, using Google Form and gather anonymous feedback from people. The people, you need to define that people. So this gets really interesting. Listen up. Don't send that feedback form to your friends, family, best friends, and your partners, and your lovers, and your husbands and wives. They are not your people in this personal brand context, okay? They know too much about you, too much as in redundant information that is not conducive or relevant to your personal brand building. Think of it this way. With these people who are really, really closer to you in your life, they have seen you bitchy, moody, crying, happy, manic, and, good days and bad days. All that, while important, not relevant to your personal brand building. For example, your mom, when you popped out of her belly, she had to clean your bottom. That's not important your personal in terms of brand building exercise. So be careful to choose the type of people who will see you in a professional way, as in you as a professional, you as the expert in your field. It could be your colleagues, it could be your mentors, it could be your managers, it could be your clients. And they are the people who will need to give you the feedback on how you're being seen by them. Oh, what's that? My stomach. Excuse me. So, when you get information in both areas, what you will see is the gap. Let me share my example. Okay. So, I have seen myself as a serious, studious, diligent, etc., etc., etc. Those are the words that I use to describe myself internally. And of course, I've done the exercise of sending the form out to people that I admire and that I love working with, etc. And they came back with the words. And those words were quite surprising, to say the least. Not at all expected, really. One of them was, rock star. Now, look, I cannot sing to save my life. Rock star, as an introvert, that was something that I could not even imagine. So I deflected, I couldn't embody it. But when it comes to branding yourself, what's already in other people's mind is something you could leverage because it's already out there. In other words, why fight it? So you may come across words that you never thought of associated with yourself, but in many ways could be really beneficial for you, for your business, for your brand going forward. So once I stopped deflecting the image of a rock star, as funny as it sounds, I was able to hone in the message and the images of my brand. This is what I mean by bridging the gap. So this kind of word will not come from family members, for example. So that's why it's so critical knowing who you ask to give you a brand keyword that could potentially change the game it could be a game changer, seriously. So I do encourage you to gather outside feedback from really important sources of your feedback group, not your lovers and not your best friends, so that you can see, you can leverage what's already out there in the minds of people who you want to serve potentially, okay? So that's why these two questions are quite critical. Now, that leads me to ask you, how do you want to be seen? So once you bridge the gap in your mind of who you are, who you think you are, who other people think of you as, then you can determine how you want to be seen. Of course, you may say that you want to be seen as a professional. But let me tell you this, professionalism is not a thing that you could project. In other words, being professional is how you're being. We are all pros. That doesn't help us. We need to be a little bit more specific about how you want to be seen as in a bit more visually descriptive keywords so that it could help you to set up a narrative of your brand. Professionalism doesn't really cut it because, for example, Johnny Ive, the famed head of Apple company, the company Apple's designer, he is a pro, but he only wears a t-shirt, white t-shirt and jeans. Look, that's still his brand. So what I'm saying is, to some people, white t-shirt and jeans may not constitute being a pro, but in some circle it is. So professional, let's get past that and get a bit more descriptive and a bit more specific so that when it comes to knowing how to show up, those words can help you. Okay, so that's what I want to say about the three questions about who you are, who you think you are, and how other people see you so that you can leverage what's already out there, the perception that's out there. During the process, you might find that you get you receive some lovely words or surprising words, and bridging the gap could be a really, really good place to be to determine how you want to be seen as a brand. Now, as a part of this knowing who you are exercise, I also invite you to look at your personality traits. One of the reasons for that is because of this. Brand building does not happen in silo. It happens among people. Among people meaning you get to experience different personalities, different, what I want to call behavioral preferences, okay? That's a bit more politically correct words. Personalities tends to carry a little bit of in some instances, it could carry little negative connotations. So I tend to use behavioral styles or behavioral preferences. So the one system I recommend looking at is called DISC. DISC is short for 4 different behavioral behavioral styles. So D means dominance, I means interactivity, S means steadiness, structured, C means conscientious, or it can also be known as analytical. Now, I know there are lots of different personality profiling tools out there, starting with the most well-known one, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, and there's color-based ones. There are so many of them out there. The reason why I use this in particular is because the other testing tools gives you in-depth information about you, and you can work out how you operate, what you're like, etc. really easily. But when it comes to working with other people, none of them really gives you a handy tool to thin slice somebody instantaneously so that you get to have a better interaction or employ a strategy that could be better for you in terms of your business and interpersonal relationships. So that's why I use DISC, simply because there are only 4 characters you have to remember, and once you understand what each character, each behavioral style tends to be like, it's much easier for you to actually use it. Very practical. That's why I use it. So in this video, below this video, you're going to have an option to take out a service where you can go into a fully comprehensive DISC profiling and a chance to sit down with an expert, accredited DISC consultant, so that you get to unpack your behavioral style and how that could help you going forward for your brand building. So check that out. So here, let me give you a little bit more information about DISC. If you have taken the test, you would have found it really, really fascinating. And not only you get to see yourself and with a little bit more clarity, but also you get to understand other people. Let me give you an example. In the past, you would have had people, characters, who might have rubbed you the wrong way. And chances are they are likely to have quite the opposite behavioral style. And in other words, not that they were rubbing the wrong way on purpose, but simply because they tend to have a slightly different preference towards interactions and doing things. Their behavioral styles are very different from yours. So once you understand that, it becomes much easier in terms of dealing with other people. And that's why I strongly recommend looking into it more deeply. So like I said, below this video, I encourage you, if you're really interested, if this is the first time looking at your behavioral style, it'll be really beneficial for you if you do take out a comprehensive report and debriefing session with one of my accredited DISC consultants. So without further ado, let me give you some insight into this. D stands for, as I said, dominant. Dominant people tend to be decisive. They have grand vision, and they tend to make grand claims. And these are the people who tend to be the top of hierarchies in owner of a company, for example. But what they are not good at, typically speaking, they are not very thorough. They can't really do operational work that much. And they have to have a team of people supporting them so that they can run a business. So while they may have great ideas, executing great ideas is not their forte. They have step-by-step as to what has to happen, but they are not likely to be the people who actually do the work. Okay, so that's the D style in a nutshell. I style, interactive people. They are the social beings. They love interacting with people. They tend to be extroverted or ambiverts, ambivert in half extrovert, half introvert, and they thrive in amongst people. So they tend to be MCs on stage. They tend to be performers, and they tend to be connectors of people. And because they are so people-oriented, they don't like having confrontations so much. So can you imagine between D and I? Type D, the highly dominant people, tend to have confrontational conversations as one of the things that had to happen. They don't see it as a confrontation. They see it as having robust conversation, while highly interactive people may see it as a personal attack because it's not what we do. People-oriented people tend to avoid confrontation, okay? So there are the two very different behavioral styles shown right there. S means steadiness. Steady people are the best people who work in a structured fashion. They think things through. They will prefer what has worked in the past. They tend not to take great risks. So you can imagine a lot of my clients tend not to be high S's. If you're a high S, you're not doomed. Look, typically entrepreneurs tend to be DIs or IDs, but it doesn't mean you are not going to make it as an entrepreneur if you're high S, because it really depends on adaptive style, which I'll cover also after I explain all 4 types. Anyway, steadiness meaning structured operational work is best suited for you, and you tend not to be in a position of decision making so much. You tend to do the work so that you can support people with great vision. C, conscientious people. They are the programmers, analysts, and who cross T's and dot I's, and they are the people who tend to be perfectionistic, who are great at developing expert knowledge in many areas. So their knowledge is not broad but very, very deep. It goes really deep into their field of expertise. So that's DISC. Now, all of us have natural tendencies. So when it comes to personality, we tend to think we are set, but that's about 50% true. The other 50% is based on environment, the kind of work that we pursue. In this context, in the brand building context, I would like to argue that you have a room for adjustment. So even if you are high S or high D, depending on the work that you want to pursue with good enough why, really strong, compelling, purposeful why, And if you see that mission that you have as an important thing in your life, you will have energy to make adjustment as needed. So all 4 characteristics are, there is no good or bad, it just is, in other words. So while you're dominant, that might, when it's dialed up too high, that might not be good for you in terms of running a business. While you are high S, it may not be helpful if you are too stuck in a rut, as in not wanting to take a risk. Because taking a risk is dominant behavior oftentimes, but you can take a risk if you have good enough reason as to why you want to do it. So I hope that's helpful. DISC is a fascinating tool. I love it, and I often use it to assess someone's behavior style so that I can make a little adjustment in terms of dealing with them and getting the result we need together as a win-win situation. So if you're interested, do check out the full DISC debriefing service down below, and I see you in our next video. Ciao.